The rancher rescued two Apache women from a deadly blizzard. What they revealed changed everything. The winter that year had been harsher than anyone in the small town of Red Rock had remembered. Snow fell in thick sheets for days, covering the land in a white blanket that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. The wind howled through the canyons and over the hills, carrying with it a bitter cold that cut through even the thickest coats. It was the kind of storm that made the entire world seem smaller, quieter, and more dangerous. And yet it was also beautiful in its own harsh way. Samuel Kane, a rancher who had lived his entire life in the rugged mountains of the Southwest, knew the land well enough to feel both the danger and the quiet majesty of a winter storm. Samuel had been checking on his cattle, walking carefully along the frozen pasture where the snow already reached his knees. Each step was a struggle, and the cold bit at his face and fingers, but he knew he had to make sure his animals were safe. The wind had been picking up all afternoon, and the clouds had grown heavier, darkening the sky until it was almost impossible to tell where the earth ended and the storm began. Samuel's breath came out in clouds, and every few steps he would pause to listen to the wind and the sounds of the cattle, trying to hear any sign that something was wrong. As he moved slowly through the snow, he noticed something unusual. At first, he thought it was a trick of the wind or a shadow of a distant tree, but then he saw it again. Two figures struggling through the storm. They were small and hunched, moving slowly, clearly fighting against both the snow and the cold. Samuel squinted through the flurries, trying to get a better look. The figures seemed almost frozen in place, stumbling as they went, and for a moment he feared they might be lost, or worse. Samuel did not hesitate. He knew the dangers of a winter storm better than most. A person could be caught in the snow for only a few minutes and suffer frostbite, or even worse, freeze completely. He ran back to his barn and saddled his horse, a sturdy brown mare that had carried him through many harsh seasons. He wrapped his coat tightly around himself, pulled on thick gloves, and climbed onto the horse, guiding her carefully through the snow. The wind tried to push him back, but he pressed forward, his eyes fixed on the two struggling figures. As he drew closer, Samuel could see that the two people were women. They were thin, their faces pale and red from the cold, and their clothing offered little protection against the freezing wind. They stumbled, slipping on the ice and snow, and Samuel could see the fear and exhaustion in their eyes. Without thinking, he rode up to them, calling out over the howl of the storm. "Hey! Come on, get on my horse," he shouted, his voice nearly lost in the wind. At first the women seemed too tired to respond, but when they saw him, a spark of hope lit in their eyes. They struggled toward him, and with careful hands, he helped them onto his horse, one at a time, wrapping them in heavy blankets he had brought along. The ride back to the ranch was treacherous. The snow had already piled high, and the wind whipped around them with relentless force. Samuel guided the horse slowly, sometimes slipping on patches of ice, but he never lost his grip or his focus. The women clung tightly to him and to each other, their teeth chattering from the cold. Samuel could feel the chill through his gloves and coat, but he refused to stop. Every step mattered. Every moment was a chance to save them from the storm's deadly grip. When they finally reached the ranch house, Samuel quickly led the horse into the barn, unhitching it and bringing it food and water. Then he helped the women inside. The warmth of the cabin was immediate, a sharp contrast to the freezing wind outside. The women sank into chairs by the fire, shivering, their bodies trembling with relief and exhaustion. Samuel brought them hot tea and wrapped them in more blankets, watching them carefully to make sure they were safe. He could see their lips turning from blue to pink, their fingers slowly regaining warmth. For the first time since he had spotted them in the snow, he allowed himself a moment to breathe. The women's eyes were filled with gratitude, but also something more: fear. Samuel knew that look well. It was the fear of someone who had been pushed to the edge of survival, someone who had faced death and come through by chance or by the kindness of another. He tried to speak gently. "You're safe here," he said. "I'll make sure you're all right. Don't worry about anything else right now." The women nodded weakly, and one of them, the taller of the two, spoke in a soft voice that Samuel had not expected. Her words were broken, careful, but he could tell she was trying to communicate. "Thank you, sir," she said, her teeth still chattering. We would have frozen without you." The other woman, smaller and more delicate, reached out and touched his hand, a silent gesture of thanks and relief. Samuel nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on him. He knew that bringing them inside was only the first step. There were still dangers outside, and there might be dangers that followed them even after the storm passed. He sat with them by the fire, listening as they slowly regained warmth and strength. They did not speak much at first, only small words and gestures, but Samuel could see that they were beginning to trust him. He asked their names, and they answered softly, Aita and Nayeli. The names had a musical quality, and Samuel felt a strange sense of connection to these strangers who had suddenly appeared in his life. He brought them food, bread, stew, and hot milk, watching as they ate hungrily but carefully, not used to such safety or abundance. As the night grew darker and the storm raged outside, Samuel began to wonder about their story. How had they ended up in the blizzard, so far from any town or settlement? Why had they been traveling alone in such dangerous conditions? He wanted to ask, but he also knew that it would take time for them to feel safe enough to answer. For now, all that mattered was keeping them alive and warm. He added more wood to the fire, and the cabin glowed with a comforting light, a small refuge against the vast white wilderness outside. Hours passed, and the women gradually relaxed. The tension in their shoulders eased, and they began to speak in soft tones, sharing fragments of their journey. Samuel listened patiently, offering blankets and hot tea whenever needed. The storm outside continued its relentless assault, but inside the cabin there was warmth, safety, and the beginning of a fragile trust. Samuel realized that this night would stay with him forever, a night when courage and kindness had collided with the unforgiving force of nature. He thought about the cold, the wind, and the snow, and how easily life could have ended for Aita and Nayeli if he had not been there. By the time the storm showed signs of slowing, the women had fallen asleep by the fire, wrapped in blankets, safe for the first time in hours or perhaps days. Samuel sat in his chair, staring into the flames, thinking about what had just happened. He knew that the night was only the beginning of a much larger story. These women had come into his life for a reason, and whatever had brought them here would not let them remain strangers for long. He felt a quiet determination rise within him. He would protect them, no matter what, until he understood why fate had sent them to his doorstep. Outside, the blizzard continued to rage for a few more hours, but the cabin remained a beacon of warmth and safety in the endless white. Samuel watched the snow through the window, feeling the weight of responsibility, but also a sense of purpose he had not felt in a long time. Somewhere out there beyond the mountains and the snow, a story was unfolding, and he was now part of it. That night, Samuel Kane realized that the harsh winter had done more than test the land and the animals. It had tested humanity itself. No. In the frozen wilderness, he had discovered courage, compassion, and the fragile thread that connected lives in the most unexpected ways. And as the fire crackled and the women slept safely, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after the blizzard was a strange and quiet one. The storm had passed, leaving the land blanketed in a smooth, untouched layer of snow. The sun rose weakly over the horizon, casting pale light over the mountains and valleys, and the entire world seemed frozen in a moment of calm. Samuel Kane stepped outside his cabin to check the weather and the cattle, breathing in the crisp, clean air. The storm had left the ranch peaceful, but he knew that the night's rescue was only the beginning of something bigger. Inside the cabin, Aita and Naili were awake, sitting near the fire and wrapped in warm blankets. Their faces, once pale and red from the cold, were now brighter, and their eyes held a mixture of gratitude, fear, and something Samuel could not yet understand. They had eaten a small breakfast, bread, hot stew, and tea, but they were quiet, watching him as he moved about, feeding the animals and preparing the cabin for the day. Samuel felt the weight of their gaze, and he realized that the women were not just exhausted from the storm. They were carrying a burden, something heavy that went beyond hunger or cold. "Good morning," Samuel said gently, trying to ease the tension. "You slept well?" Aita nodded slowly, her dark hair falling over her shoulders. "Better, thank you," she said softly. Her voice was quiet but steady, and Samuel noticed a sense of resilience in her words. Nayeli, the smaller woman, glanced up at him and smiled faintly. "We are warm," she said, her accent soft but clear. Samuel felt a strange sense of relief. Even small signs of comfort meant the world to people who had just faced death. Samuel decided to give them space, knowing that trust could not be forced. He spent the morning checking on the cattle, repairing a broken fence, and doing chores that had been delayed by the storm. Occasionally he would glance at the cabin, seeing Aida and Nayeli moving quietly inside. They were careful not to draw attention to themselves, and their movements were graceful and precise. Samuel could sense their strength, even as he knew how weak the storm had made them. By midday, Samuel felt that it was time to learn more about the women. He brewed fresh tea and brought it to them, sitting across from Aita at the table. "You don't have to tell me everything," he said gently, "but I want to help. Can you tell me why you were out in the storm?" Aita's eyes flickered with caution, and she glanced at Nayeli before speaking. "We were traveling," she said carefully, "but it was not safe. There were, people after us." Her words were hesitant, as if she had practiced them 100 times but was afraid of being misunderstood. Samuel nodded slowly. He had seen fear before, but this was different. This was a quiet, deep fear, the kind that came from knowing that danger was always near. Nayeli spoke next, her voice trembling slightly. "We were running from people who wanted to take something from us, something important." She looked down at her hands, twisting the fingers of her gloves nervously. Samuel could feel the tension in the room, a mix of fear and determination that the women carried like armor. He realized that they were not ordinary travelers caught in a storm. They were fleeing something dangerous and important. Samuel leaned back in his chair, thinking carefully. "You're safe here," he said, his voice calm but firm. "No one can reach you here. I will make sure of it. But I need to understand, what is it that you're carrying?" "Something important, you said?" Aita and Nayeli exchanged a glance, a silent communication that Samuel could not understand. Finally Aita spoke, her voice low and careful. "It is knowledge that belongs to our people. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could hurt many. That is why we must protect it." Samuel listened intently, realizing that their story was larger than he had first imagined. These women were guardians of something far more valuable than money or possessions. They carried secrets, history, and responsibility. The day passed slowly, each hour filled with cautious conversation and small acts of trust. Samuel showed the women around the ranch, helping them see the animals and the barns. He explained the routines of life in the mountains, the way the snow affected the pastures, how to keep warm, and how to read the sky for approaching storms. Aita and Nayeli listened closely, asking questions and learning quickly. Samuel admired their curiosity and intelligence, and he began to feel a sense of respect for them that went beyond gratitude. In the afternoon, as the sun rose higher and reflected off the snow, Samuel asked them more about their journey. "How did you end up in the blizzard?" he asked. "Were you traveling from a town or somewhere else?" Aita hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "We were moving through the mountains," she said. "Our people, our tribe, had sent us away. There were problems. People who wanted to take what is ours." She looked at Samuel with eyes that were both serious and sorrowful. "We did not have a choice. The storm, it came while we were walking. We were caught, and we could not stop. Without you, we would not be alive." Samuel felt a chill run down his spine, not from the cold, but from the weight of their words. He realized that he had stumbled into a story far larger than a simple rescue. These women were fleeing danger that he could not yet see, and yet they trusted him enough to let him help. That trust was rare, and Samuel knew he had to honor it. Nayeli finally spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "We do not know who we can trust.
Many people have tried to take what we protect.
We have learned to hide, to move quietly, to survive." She paused, looking out the window at the mountains beyond the ranch. "We did not want to burden anyone, but the storm—"
It left us no choice. Samuel nodded, understanding more than words could say.
These women had survived hardship before the blizzard, and the storm had been only one of many dangers in their journey. As the afternoon turned to evening, Samuel began to prepare dinner. He cooked over the fireplace, simmering stew and baking bread. The smell filled the cabin, and Aita and Nayeli watched him with a mixture of curiosity and hunger. Samuel set plates before them, and they ate slowly, savoring each bite. He noticed the small gestures, the way they shared the food, the careful attention to cleanliness, and the way they looked at each other for reassurance. These were women who had survived by relying on each other, and their bond was strong and unspoken. After dinner, Samuel brought out more blankets and added extra wood to the fire.
"You must be very tired," he said kindly. "The storm was difficult, and your journey even more so."
"You need to rest." Aita shook her head slightly. "We cannot rest completely," she said. "There are people who may follow us. We must be ready." Her eyes were dark with determination, and Samuel could see the courage that had carried them through the blizzard. Nayeli nodded in agreement, and Samuel realized that these women were not only survivors, they were fighters in their own quiet way. That night, as the fire crackled and the cabin glowed warmly, Samuel sat in his chair and watched the women. They were exhausted, but their eyes were open, alert, and thoughtful. He felt a strange mixture of admiration and responsibility. He had saved their lives, yes, but now he understood that he was part of something larger, a story of survival, courage, and secrets that could change lives. Outside, the snow glistened under the pale moonlight, and the mountains stood silent and still. Inside, the cabin was warm and alive with quiet energy. Samuel realized that the storm had brought more than danger. It had brought purpose. He had rescued 2 women from near death, and in doing so, he had become a part of a story that was far from over. As the women finally lay down to rest, Samuel felt a sense of resolve settle over him. He would protect them, he would listen to them, and he would help them survive whatever came next. The day had been long, filled with fear and uncertainty, but it had also revealed strength, courage, and trust. Samuel knew that the blizzard was only the beginning, and that the real journey, for all of them, was just beginning. The days after the blizzard brought a fragile calm to Samuel Kane's ranch. The sun reflected brightly on the snow, making the hills and mountains glimmer like crystal. The air was cold but clear, and the silence of the land was almost magical. Yet inside Samuel's cabin, a tension quietly lingered. Aita and Nayeli had begun to relax slightly in their new surroundings, but Samuel could sense that their minds were still alert, always scanning for danger. Their cautious movements, their quick glances toward the windows, and the occasional whispered conversations in their own language reminded him that their journey had not ended with the storm. Samuel continued his daily chores, keeping the ranch running while also protecting the women. He fed the cattle, checked fences, and chopped wood for the long winter ahead. He tried to keep a normal rhythm, but every now and then his gaze drifted to the cabin. The women were learning small tasks, helping with the animals and carrying water from the well, but they were careful not to appear too comfortable. Their wariness was not fear of him. It was fear of the unknown, of the world beyond the safety of the ranch. One afternoon, Samuel noticed something strange. A few neighbors, curious about the storm and the rescue, had begun to ask questions. "You found who in the blizzard?" one man had asked, peering through the frost-covered windows of the cabin. "What are they doing here?" Samuel could see the suspicion in their eyes. In a small town like Red Rock, anything unusual quickly drew attention, and strangers, even women in need, could be met with doubt or distrust. He knew he had to handle it carefully. Samuel explained briefly that he had rescued 2 travelers from the storm and that they were recovering safely. He avoided revealing too much about their past or their journey. Some neighbors accepted his explanation, while others shook their heads and whispered behind closed doors. Samuel could feel the tension growing. He realized that the outside world could become dangerous for Aita and Nayeli, not just from people seeking them, but from those who did not understand or trust them. Inside the cabin, Aita and Nayeli were aware of the growing unease. They moved quietly, speaking softly in their own language, but Samuel began to catch small fragments. Words like follow, danger, and betrayal floated through the air. He realized that their past had reached further than he had imagined, that the blizzard had been only one of many threats in their journey. He could see the lines of worry etched on their faces, the way they instinctively checked doors and windows, and the careful way they arranged their belongings. One evening, as the wind began to pick up again, Samuel decided to talk to them more directly. He wanted to understand what they were fleeing, but he also wanted to reassure them.
"You're safe here," he said gently.
"No one can hurt you on this land, but I need to know more so I can help. Can you tell me why people are after you?" Aita exchanged a quick glance with Nayeli before answering. "It is complicated," she said. Her voice was quiet but steady, and Samuel could feel the weight of her words. "We are not just travelers. We carry knowledge, something important. People want it for themselves, and it could bring harm if they get it." She paused, her eyes dark and serious. "We were forced to leave our home. Some in our own tribe wanted to take it. Others outside the tribe might try to steal it. We cannot trust anyone." Samuel listened carefully, absorbing each word. He realized that this was no ordinary story of survival. It was a tale of secrets, power, and responsibility. Aita and Naeli were guardians of something far greater than gold or silver. Their journey had been dangerous long before the storm, and the blizzard had nearly ended their lives. Now, they had found safety, but the threat of betrayal still hung over them. Naeli spoke next, her voice soft but firm. "Iburn hide. We have always had to move quietly to watch our backs, to protect what is ours. The storm was only one obstacle. Others will come, looking for what we carry." She looked out the window, scanning the snowy hills beyond the ranch. Samuel could feel her fear, but also her courage. She was tired, yet determined. She would not give up, and she would not allow what they protected to fall into the wrong hands. As the days passed, Samuel noticed small signs of potential danger, footprints in the snow that did not belong to him or his neighbors, distant figures that vanished when approached, and the occasional rumor from the townspeople that strangers had been seen near the outskirts of the mountains. Samuel knew that these were not random events. Someone was searching for Aita and Naeli, and he had to be vigilant to keep them safe. He began making small preparations. He reinforced the doors and windows of the cabin, stored extra food and blankets, and mapped out escape routes in case the women needed to leave quickly. He taught them how to check the land for tracks and how to move quietly without leaving signs behind. Aita and Naeli learned quickly, absorbing his knowledge with a seriousness that impressed him. Samuel realized that they were not helpless, they were partners in survival, and their courage and intelligence would be vital in the days to come. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low behind the mountains, Samuel and the women were checking the perimeter of the ranch. The snow reflected the golden light of sunset, creating a surreal, almost magical landscape. Aita paused suddenly, her eyes narrowing. "Did you see that?" she asked softly, pointing toward a ridge in the distance. Samuel squinted and saw a shadow moving among the rocks. It was small, distant, and easily mistaken for a boulder, but Samuel's instincts told him it was someone watching. He nodded silently. "Stay close," he whispered. Together they moved back toward the cabin, careful not to be seen. Samuel felt a mixture of fear and determination. The danger was real, but he was not about to let it reach the women under his care. That night, as the fire crackled and the cabin glowed warmly, they spoke quietly about the events of the day. Aita and Naeli explained that they had experienced this kind of pursuit before, that they had learned to hide and to protect themselves, but they had never expected to find someone willing to help them without question. Samuel listened, feeling a deep sense of responsibility and pride. Over the following days, Samuel began to see changes in the women. They were still cautious, but they were learning to trust him. They laughed softly at small jokes, shared stories of their childhoods, and even helped him with chores around the ranch. Yet beneath the calm moments, there was always an undercurrent of tension. Every sound outside, every unfamiliar figure, every shift in the wind reminded them of the dangers they faced. Samuel understood that the storm had not only tested their bodies, it had tested their spirits, their patience, and their trust. One evening, as they sat by the fire after a long day, Samuel decided to ask the question that had been on his mind for days. "What exactly are you protecting?" he asked gently. "I need to understand so I can help." Aita and Naeli exchanged a long, serious glance. Finally, Aita spoke, her voice low and careful. "It is knowledge, knowledge of our people, our history, our secrets. It is sacred. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could bring great harm. That is why we must hide it, even from those who might seem friendly." Samuel nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of their words. This was no ordinary danger. It was a threat to heritage, culture, and life itself. He realized that his role was more than that of a rescuer. He had become a protector of something far greater than himself. As the week passed, the small ranch became a place of quiet vigilance. Samuel taught the women to check the skies for approaching threats, to read tracks in the snow, and to move silently through the hills if needed. Aita and Nayeli adapted quickly, showing remarkable skill and intelligence. Samuel felt a growing respect for them, not just for their bravery, but for their wisdom, their loyalty, and their courage in the face of constant danger. Despite the tension, moments of calm and beauty still existed. They would sometimes walk outside when the sun was high, the snow sparkling around them, and feel a brief sense of freedom. They shared stories, laughter, and quiet reflection, and Samuel realized that the bond between them was growing stronger with each passing day. They were no longer just strangers brought together by a storm. They were a team, a small family united by trust, courage, and shared experience. Yet Samuel never let his guard down. Every sound in the hills, every unfamiliar footprint in the snow, every rumor from the town reminded him that danger was never far away. He knew that the women's journey was far from over, and that the blizzard had been only the first test of their strength, courage, and resolve. And in the quiet moments, when the fire burned low and the wind whispered outside, Samuel thought about the future. He knew that the challenges ahead would be greater than any storm he had faced before, but he also knew that with Aita and Nayeli by his side, and with the trust they had built, they would face whatever came together. The story was far from over, and the next chapter was waiting, hidden somewhere beyond the mountains, the snow, and the safety of the ranch. The days in Samuel Kane's cabin had become routine, yet the tension never fully left the air. Aita and Nayeli had started to feel slightly safer, but the fear that had followed them since their departure from their tribe was never far away. Every glance out the window, every shadow on the snow, reminded them that their journey was not yet over. Samuel could see it in their eyes. They were vigilant, careful, and always alert, as if danger could appear at any moment. One afternoon, after a long morning of tending the animals and repairing the fences, Samuel called the women to sit with him by the fire. The sun had started to dip behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the snow. "I know you're cautious," he said softly, "but I need to understand. You've trusted me enough to come inside, but there's more I need to know. What exactly are you protecting?" Aita and Nayeli exchanged a quick glance, and for a moment neither spoke. The silence was heavy, filled with unspoken fears and careful consideration. Then Aita finally spoke, her voice low but firm. "It is knowledge," she said. "Knowledge that belongs to our people. It is the history of our ancestors, the stories of our tribe, and secrets that must be preserved. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could harm not only our people, but others as well." Samuel listened carefully, understanding only part of what she meant. "Knowledge?" he asked. "Stories? Secrets? Can you be more specific?" Aita shook her head slowly. "It is more than just stories. It is guidance, wisdom, and paths that have been protected for generations. There are maps, symbols, and instructions that lead to sacred places, places where our ancestors placed things of great value, things that must never be taken or misused. Some people would use this knowledge for selfish purposes, to gain power or control. That is why we left our home and why we traveled through the mountains, even during the storm." Nayeli leaned forward, her eyes serious. "We were trained to protect it. We learned from our elders, our mothers, and our fathers. Every step we take, every word we speak, is guided by the duty to preserve this knowledge. It is sacred, Samuel. And now you are part of this story because you saved our lives. We trust you, but we need you to understand how serious this is." Samuel felt the weight of their words pressing on him. He had known from the start that their story was extraordinary, but now he realized the full extent. These women were not just travelers or victims of a storm. They were guardians of a legacy that had survived for generations. The blizzard had been only a test of survival. The real challenges lay ahead, in protecting knowledge that could change the balance of power in the region. "I understand," Samuel said quietly. "I promise I will help you. I will do whatever I can to keep you safe and to protect what you carry." Aita and Nayeli nodded, relief softening their features. For the first time since arriving at the cabin, they allowed themselves to relax, if only a little. They began to share fragments of their journey, how they had learned the secrets of their tribe, how their elders had entrusted them with maps and symbols, and how dangerous it had become when outsiders began searching for what they carried. Samuel listened intently, realizing that the women had survived not just nature, but human greed and betrayal. Over the next few days, Samuel helped them make plans for protecting their knowledge. He reinforced the cabin, created hidden compartments for their most important items, and taught them ways to observe the land for approaching danger. Aita and Nayeli were quick learners, their sharp minds and careful training making them efficient partners in this effort. Together they mapped out escape routes through the mountains, practiced moving silently, and planned signals to communicate if anyone approached. Despite the seriousness of their mission, Samuel noticed moments of human warmth and connection. The women laughed softly at small mistakes, shared stories of their childhoods, and even helped him in the kitchen or with chores around the ranch. These moments reminded Samuel that courage and duty could exist alongside friendship and trust. He felt proud of them, not just for surviving, but for carrying on the legacy of their people with such determination and wisdom. One evening, as a soft snow began to fall again, Aita and Nayeli spoke about the larger journey they had undertaken. "We were sent to protect this knowledge," Aita said, her voice calm but serious. "Our elders knew that one day outsiders might come seeking to misuse it. We were chosen because we are careful, trained, and strong. But the journey is long, and we have learned that danger is never far. Samuel, you helped us survive the storm, but the real challenge is keeping this knowledge safe for the future." Nayeli added, "We cannot do it alone. We need people we can trust. That is why we are telling you now. You have proven your courage, your wisdom, and your heart. We believe you can help us protect what is sacred." Samuel nodded, feeling both pride and responsibility. He understood that this was more than a personal act of kindness. He had been drawn into a larger story, one that required vigilance, intelligence, and trust. The women's journey had become his own, and he was determined not to fail them. The following days were filled with preparation and learning. Samuel taught them how to read the land for signs of intruders, how to move quietly without leaving tracks, and how to observe the sky and the mountains for approaching travelers. Aita and Nayeli shared their knowledge of symbols, maps, and ancestral guidance, revealing fragments of the sacred legacy they carried. Samuel marveled at their intelligence, their memory, and their courage. He realized that they were not just survivors, they were teachers, warriors, and guardians of a history that few could understand. As the days turned into weeks, Samuel noticed subtle changes in the environment around the ranch. Footprints appeared in the snow, distant figures moved across the hills, and strange sounds echoed through the canyons. The women's fears were not unfounded. Danger was approaching, and they had to be prepared. Samuel and the women made final adjustments to their plans, hiding the most important items and setting up signals to communicate across distances. They practiced moving quickly, quietly, and efficiently, ready for any threat that might come. One night, as the fire burned low and the wind howled outside, Aita and Nayeli revealed the final piece of their secret. "There is a location," Aita said, her eyes steady and serious, "a place that must never be found by the wrong people. It holds the greatest part of our knowledge, the maps, symbols, and history of our ancestors. We were sent to protect it. We have traveled for weeks, avoiding danger to ensure it remains safe. Samuel, we believe that with your help, it can be protected." Nayeli added, "This is why we cannot stay hidden forever. We must move carefully, and we must trust only a few people. The journey is not over, but the knowledge must survive. That is our duty, our responsibility, and our promise to those who came before us." Samuel felt a deep sense of responsibility settle on him. He had known that the women were important, that their journey was dangerous, but now he understood the true scale of their mission. He realized that the blizzard, the mountains, and the threats they had faced were only the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, in protecting the sacred knowledge and ensuring that it would survive for future generations. For the first time, Samuel felt the full weight of their trust. He was no longer just a rescuer. He was a protector, a partner, and a guardian of a story that stretched back centuries. The fire crackled, the wind whistled outside, and the women sat quietly by his side, their faces calm but alert. Together they planned the next steps of the journey, each of them aware that the path ahead would be difficult, dangerous, and filled with uncertainty. And yet, in that moment, there was also hope. The storm had passed, and a bond had formed between them. They had survived nature, fear, and uncertainty, and now they were united in purpose. Samuel knew that the days ahead would test them in ways they could not yet imagine, but he also knew that together they were strong enough to face whatever challenges came their way. The night passed quietly, but the sense of urgency never left the cabin. Samuel lay awake for hours, thinking about the journey ahead, the knowledge the women protected, and the responsibility now entrusted to him. He realized that the blizzard had brought them together, but it was their courage, wisdom, and determination that would guide them through the trials still to come. As dawn approached, the first light touched the snow-covered hills, and Samuel felt a quiet determination rising within him. The women had revealed their secret, and the story was no longer theirs alone. It was a story of trust, courage, and the preservation of something far greater than themselves, and Samuel knew with certainty that he would do everything in his power to ensure that this knowledge, this legacy, would survive. The morning sun broke over the mountains, casting long shadows across the snow-covered hills. The world outside Samuel Kane's ranch was calm, deceptively peaceful after the storms and tension of the past weeks. Yet inside the cabin the air was filled with quiet determination. Aita and Nayeli had revealed their secret, and now it was time to act. The knowledge they carried, the maps, the symbols, and the sacred guidance of their ancestors, was too valuable to leave unprotected. Samuel could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on him, but he also felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. The three of them gathered around the fire, spreading out maps and documents that Aita and Nayeli had carefully hidden. Samuel studied the intricate symbols, tracing the paths with his finger, trying to understand what the women had been protecting for so long.
"We have to move carefully," Aita said, her voice calm but firm.
"There are others who will try to find this place. Some are after the knowledge, and some only want to control it. If we make a mistake, everything is lost." Nayeli nodded, her eyes scanning the mountains through the frost-covered window. "We know the path, but it is dangerous. We must travel quietly and be prepared for anything." "You have proven your courage, Samuel. But this will test all of us. Samuel felt a shiver run down his spine, not from cold, but from the reality of what they were about to undertake. The blizzard had been only the first challenge. Now the real journey was beginning. They packed supplies carefully, making sure to bring only what was necessary. Food, blankets, rope, and a few tools would be enough for the journey ahead. But every item was chosen with purpose. Aita and Naeli moved with practiced efficiency, their training evident in every motion. Samuel followed their lead, trusting them completely, yet keeping his senses alert to the dangers of the wilderness. As they stepped outside, the mountains stretched before them, vast and silent. The snow glistened under the morning sun, but Samuel knew that the beauty of the landscape could not hide its dangers. The paths were narrow and treacherous, the slopes steep, and the wind sharp and cold. Yet they moved forward, guided by trust, knowledge, and determination. Samuel could see the focus in Aita and Naeli's eyes, and he realized that their strength came not just from training, but from the deep sense of responsibility they carried. For hours they traveled through the mountains, carefully following hidden trails that only the women knew. The wind whispered through the trees, and the snow crunched under their boots, but they made little noise. Every sound, every movement, was controlled and deliberate. Samuel felt a mixture of awe and respect for Aita and Naeli. They were not just survivors, but masters of the land, skilled at navigating dangers that he would never have imagined. As night approached, they found a sheltered area in the trees and set up a small camp. Samuel built a fire, careful to keep it low so it would not be seen from a distance, while Aita and Naeli shared stories of the places they had visited and the dangers they had faced. Samuel listened in silence, realizing that these women had survived more than just storms. They had faced betrayal, pursuit, and the constant threat of losing everything they protected, yet they had never wavered, never given up. The following days were filled with careful travel, observation, and preparation. They avoided obvious trails, watched for footprints in the snow, and communicated with quiet signals. Samuel learned quickly, adapting to the rhythm of their journey. He could see how every action mattered, how a single misstep could lead to discovery, and how every choice carried weight. Aita and Naeli moved with confidence and caution, teaching him the lessons of their people, the importance of knowledge, and the need to protect it at all costs. One afternoon, as they approached a narrow pass between two hills, Aita suddenly raised her hand. She crouched low and whispered, "Stop. Someone is ahead." Samuel's heart raced. Through the trees he could just make out figures, moving carefully, almost like shadows. They were not close, but they were searching, and they could discover the path if they were not careful. Samuel felt a surge of determination. He had faced storms and danger before, but this was different. This was a threat to lives, history, and legacy. He and the women moved silently, circling around the intruders and finding a safer route. Aita and Naeli's knowledge of the land saved them, and Samuel felt a deep respect for their skill and bravery. The threat had been real, but together they had avoided it without confrontation. That night, in a hidden valley, they finally reached the location that Aita and Naeli had described. It was a secluded area, protected by natural barriers and hidden from view. There, in a small, carefully chosen space, lay the relics, maps, and sacred objects that had been passed down through generations. Samuel could see the reverence in the women's faces as they carefully arranged everything. This was the heart of their people's legacy, preserved despite the storms, dangers, and betrayals they had faced. Aita spoke softly, her voice filled with both pride and relief. "It is safe for now," she said. "The knowledge is protected, and it will continue to be so. Those who try to misuse it will never find it, and those who come with respect will be guided by it. Samuel, you have helped us reach this place, and because of you, it survives. Nayeli added, we could not have done this alone. The journey was long, dangerous, and uncertain, but together we succeeded. We have honored the trust of our ancestors and protected what is sacred. Samuel felt a warmth in his chest, a sense of accomplishment that went beyond anything he had ever known. He had saved lives, yes, but he had also become part of something timeless, something larger than himself. The journey back to the ranch was quieter. The snow had melted slightly, revealing the earth beneath, and the sun shone warmly on the hills. Samuel, Aita, and Nayeli moved carefully, but there was a sense of relief and quiet celebration in their steps. They had survived the storm, the threats, and the dangers of the journey, and they had protected what mattered most. Samuel felt a deep connection to the women, a bond forged in trust, courage, and shared experience. When they returned to the ranch, the townspeople were surprised to see them. Samuel explained only that the women had completed a difficult journey and were safe. There was curiosity, yes, but there was also respect. Samuel could see that the story of survival, courage, and trust had begun to spread quietly among the people, though the sacred details remained known only to those who had earned them. In the days that followed, life returned to a quieter rhythm. The cattle were tended, the cabins maintained, and the snow slowly receded from the mountains. Yet for Samuel, Aita, and Nayeli, the journey had left a lasting mark. They had faced storms, threats, and the unknown, and they had emerged stronger, wiser, and closer than ever. Samuel realized that courage was not just about survival. It was about responsibility, trust, and the willingness to protect what is important, no matter the cost. One evening, as the sun set and the mountains glowed in golden light, Samuel stood outside the cabin, watching the women move gracefully through the snow, tending to small tasks with care and precision. He reflected on the journey they had shared, the blizzard, the dangers, the revelations, and the triumphs. The storm had brought them together, but it was their courage, determination, and trust that had carried them to the end. Aita and Nayeli approached him, their faces calm and serene. "Thank you," Aita said softly. "You saved our lives, helped us protect our legacy, and became part of our story. We will never forget it." Nayeli nodded, adding, "The knowledge is safe, and because of you, it will continue to guide our people. You are part of this journey now, Samuel, and we honor that." Samuel felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The blizzard, the mountains, and the dangers had tested them all, but in the end, they had succeeded. They had preserved what was sacred, protected what was precious, and forged bonds that would last a lifetime. He realized that life was not just about surviving storms or avoiding danger. It was about courage, trust, and the choices we make when faced with the unknown. As the night fell and stars appeared above the mountains, the cabin glowed warmly. Samuel, Aita, and Nayeli sat by the fire, sharing quiet conversation and comfortable silence. The storm had passed, the journey was complete, and the legacy was safe. And in that moment, Samuel understood that life could change in an instant, that courage could appear when least expected, and that the bonds we form through trust and bravery could last forever. The mountains were still, the snow was soft and white, and the story that had begun with a blizzard had reached its conclusion. Samuel Kane had saved 2 women from the storm, and in doing so, he had helped protect a legacy that would endure for generations. The journey had been difficult, the dangers real, but in the end, courage, trust, and determination had triumphed. And as he looked at Aita and Nayeli, safe and strong by his side, he knew that some stories, like theirs, were meant to be remembered forever.